Welcome to part 2 of the 3rd annual SR4U Boot Awards, brought to you by me, because if I didn't make this video, you wouldn't be watching this right now. So yeah. What's going on, guys? Josh from soccerreviewsforyou.com, bringing you part 2 of the 2018 SR4U Boot Awards. If you haven't seen part 1, go and watch part 1, because why would you watch part 2 before watching part 1? Also in part 1, I explain all the criteria for the awards that are also featured in part 2, but I'm not going to explain it in part 2 because I already explained it in part 1. So if you haven't watched part 1, little pop-up on screen, go ahead and check it out. Without further ado, let's get into part 2 of the SR4U Boot Awards. Enjoy. Also, if you liked part 1, please like part 2 because it's only fair. Starting off part 2 with a bang, the least interesting boot of 2018, which you might actually be most interested in seeing what I think is the least interesting, but I think most of you guys will agree, the least interesting football boot, or I should say line of boots in 2018, has to be the Nemesis 18 generation. I have the Nemesis 18.1 here as an example, and the reason why I think this is the least interesting line of boots in 2018, the regular 18.1, the laceless 18 plus, and the messy 18.1 variation as well, is mainly because the original 17 generation of Nemesis boots, people weren't that interested in. So when the 18 generation came out and was more or less the exact same thing, obviously some tweaks to the upper material and the general construction, but to the general public, they kind of viewed it as the exact same thing because they do look quite similar. People just weren't that interested, and the sales have reflected that. It's not to say that the Nemesis 18 generation is bad in any way at all, because it's not. But in terms of features and what it has on offer in comparison to everything else, there's just nothing that interesting about it. I would actually bet that a lot of casual football boot enthusiasts didn't even realize that this was a new version of the Nemesis. When it comes to limited releases, I think in 2018 we got more than we had ever seen before, which I'm not mad at all. It just made my choice for the winner of this award very, very difficult. And I have picked one winner, but keep in mind there are going to be quite a few honorable mentions for this one. But for me, if I had to pick one winner, it has to be the remake of the Adidas Predator Accelerator. And I really like the electricity yellow ones rather than the classic black, white, and red. Those are cool too, but this is the colorway that I remember from my childhood. I absolutely love the fact that it's such a bulky boot in this obnoxious neon yellow with this kind of bright orangish red color. It's just not something that you would expect for this style of boot as far as the color combination is concerned. And obviously any remake of an old Predator is going to be really cool. The Accelerator is one of the older style Predators in terms of just how it looks, having this kind of more old school flap tongue versus the more modern one that we would eventually get on something like the Mania. But as a whole, I just think that this looks so cool. It feels so cool. The quality of the Kanki leather is tremendous. The rubberized elements are there. The upper is very, very close to the original, which I'm a big fan of. And then of course they partnered that with the sole plate and stud pattern from the current Predators, which I'm not a huge fan of, but as an overall package and with the upper that you have on this particular boot, the package as a whole works really, really well. It's too bad that these were limited. I really hope we get this as a general release at some point in time from Adidas or some variation of this. And for me, this was my personal favorite LE release of 2018. Huge shout out to the Rivaldo Mizuno Wave Cup Legend as well. This is more or less an exact remake of a boot that we already know and love. It's really good quality, as you would expect from any made in Japan Mizuno product. Again, it's just a shame that they were so limited. Also a shout out to the Nike GS 360. While visually I don't think it's the coolest thing in the world, from a performance standpoint, they've actually done something pretty special here. Also a shout out to the Ronaldinho Tiempo Legend 1 Legend 7 Hybrid Remake boot. Really big fan of Ronaldinho, really big fan of the Tiempo Legend 1, really big fan of this white and gold colorway, and this was just a very well executed limited edition release. And a final shout out to, no, I'm just kidding, these are kind of weird looking. Similar to the Best Speed Boot Award, this is one of the most important awards that I'm going to be giving out because knitted uppers have become a huge part of the modern football boot industry. Nike has Flyknit, Adidas has Prime Knit, Puma has Evo Knit, if they're still calling it that, and every brand has their own variation of some kind of a knitted upper. So the best knitted boot is actually a pretty big deal. And for me, there's one boot in particular, for reasons that I'll explain, that I think is not only the best knitted boot of 2018, but arguably the best knitted football boot ever made, and it is the Nike Phantom Vision Elite. The reason why I think this is such an impressive knitted upper is mainly because it has no rigidity to it. The main concept behind making knitted uppers in the first place is they wanted to achieve that sock-like fit and that sock-like level of comfort that you get from a simple pair of socks, but obviously in football boot form. And realistically, up until this point, almost every knitted upper that we've had is reinforced by some kind of a rigid plastic element. None of them really feel like true socks, not even the Phantom Vision Elite. But what's cool about this is the fact that the Flyknit that you see on the external part of the upper is not reinforced by any significant amount of plastic, just a very thin layer of this Nike Skin top layer for the sake of protection and adding all the texturing. And then internally you have their new quad fit system, which is basically a special material that Nike have developed along with a lacing system that when you tie the laces tight, it really locks in place really effectively without having any kind of hard structure to it. So you're not gonna find any plastic elements in this upper. It basically just feels like a sock attached to a plastic sole plate, which means that the break-in time is basically non-existent. And the way that this boot fits and wraps your foot when you tie those laces tight is unlike any other knitted upper that I've personally ever tried. I know that not everyone's a huge fan of the look of the Phantom Vision Elite, but in terms of just being a straight up high quality knitted upper that really feels like a knitted upper should, in my opinion, this is the best knitted boot of 2018. Now, there's no question that top-of-the-line football boots are really expensive. Some people can't afford them, and a lot of people just aren't willing to pay those high prices for a pair of boots that they're realistically going to wear for one season and then throw in the garbage, which always leads to the question, what's the best value for money? The best quality product you can get for the least amount of money, which is a perfectly reasonable question, and there are lots of great options out there. But for 2018, there are two in particular that I think are the clear winners that I've picked basically because they are on opposite ends of the spectrum in regards to fit and feel. The Nike Mercurial Vapor 12 Pro and the Nike Tiempo Legend 7 Pro. The Vapor 12 Pro retailing for $120, the Tiempo's retailing for $130, but both offering way more than what the price would suggest. The Vapor 12 Pro is basically everything you get with the $250 Vapor 12 Elite that I think is an excellent boot, arguably a little bit better. It's everything you get with that minus the Flyknit upper swapped out for what feels like a high-end Asian synthetic like we would have got on the previous top-end Vapor 10 or Vapor 11, but for $120 rather than $250. And then the Tiempo Legend 7 Pro is basically everything you get with the top-of-the-line Tiempo Legend 7 Elite that retails for $100 more at $230, minus the Flyknit that arguably doesn't really make any difference, the Flyknit in the tongue, this tongue being arguably just as good, and then little things like ACC and just minor things that you really aren't going to notice anyways. Both of these boots basically being 95% of what you get from the top-of-the-line options that retail for double the price. So in terms of value for money, if you're looking for the best possible speed boot for a low price, this is what I would get. If you want something with a leather upper, even if you're just interested in something like the Tiempo Legend 7 Elite but don't want to spend quite as much money, again, the Legend 7 Pro is really, really good. Now, like we just talked about, to some people, all top-end boots are overpriced, but I'm not just giving this award to the most expensive boot out there because that's not exactly the point. The point of this award is to highlight boots that cost more money than they should based on the fact that you have other options out there that are just as good, if not better, for less money. And when I think of overpriced boots, I really think about what Adidas is currently doing with having two different variations of their top-end models in each and every line. And that's not to say that the most expensive version is always overpriced, but when you're talking about a laced version and a laceless version that are almost exactly the same, but the laceless version is worse and costs a lot more, that, in my opinion, makes them overpriced, which is why the winner for this particular award is the Adidas X18 Plus with its $280 retail price and the Predator 19 Plus with its $275 retail price. both of which a lot more expensive than the 0.1 laced variations. The X18.1 retails for $225, the Predator 19.1 also retails for $225, both of which I think are better than the more expensive laceless variations. Now, if you're into the whole laceless thing and you can justify the price tag, by all means go and get them. I'm not saying that these two boots are bad, but in terms of overall fit, feel, and overall performance, the objective things about what makes a football boot good, the 0.1 variations with the lacing system are simply better and less expensive. So again, if you're trying to avoid boots that are a little bit overpriced, I'm not saying all the laceless boots from Adidas are overpriced, because I actually really like the Copa 19 Plus more than the cheaper Copa 19.1. But when you're talking about the Predator and the X line, I really don't think that the more expensive Plus models are worth your money. Oh, I really wanted to itch my nose there. Whew. The most likely to put you in the hospital award is pretty self-explanatory in that it is the boot that if you get stepped on, you are most likely going to have to go to the hospital because your foot will be broken and bleeding and broken, which is why this award could only go to one boot in 2018. One that I actually really like, as goofy as this award is, the Under Armour Magnetico Pro. This is easily the thinnest pair of football boots that I have personally ever worn. As you can see by this upper, it is kind of just melting. It's barely thick enough to hold itself together, and that's because it's legitimately that thin, but at the same time, it's so soft. I think a lot of people, when they think about thin uppers, they think about what Nike has done with the Mercurial Vapor line and those Teijin synthetics, which have been great, but none of them are as soft as this. And admittedly, this is not quite as responsive or secure or as tight fitting around your foot as what you get from some of those Mercurial Vapor models, but they're super thin. Really, it feels like you're not wearing any boots at all, but at the same time, they're remarkably comfortable. It has a very traditional construction. There's really not much to break in here, and everything about the boot certainly isn't perfect, but in terms of the experience on offer here, if you really want to feel like you're playing totally barefoot in regards to the feel for the ball, there is nothing that even comes close to the Magnetico Pro. See that scuff right there? That was a trip to the hospital. Something that's really fun about the modern football boot industry is because there's always new products, there's always something to look forward to. And often that new product comes out and it does live up to the hype. It's exactly what you were hoping for. But oftentimes as well, you can end up being a little bit disappointed. So for me, the most disappointing boot of 2018 has to be the new Predator 19 generation. Predator 19 Plus, 19.1, doesn't really matter. This is a boot that I was really hoping to get a lot more from. When Adidas reintroduced the Predator line in the form of the Predator 18 generation with the 18 Plus and 18.1 being the top end models, basically it was a rebranded Ace. That could have easily just have been the Ace 18 Plus and Ace 18.1 and nobody would have known the difference. But for this next generation Predator, the 19 generation, I was really hoping for something that was more along the lines of what we would expect from what the Predator line has represented in the past, something with those rubberized striking elements. I didn't expect a leather upper, I didn't expect a big fold over flap tongue, but I wanted something that tied in to what the Predator line had been up until the Predator 18 generation when they reintroduced it. I was basically hoping for some kind of lethal zones elements that we had on the Predator LZ1 and 2 and the Predator Instinct. But unfortunately, what we ended up getting instead was this big rubber blob attached to the heel and some painted lines on the edges here on the medial side. Basically the exact same boot with a 19 in front of it instead of an 18. They really haven't changed much at all. It's just a rebranded model, which is not bad. The boot's not bad. It's just not the Predator that I wanted, which is why I'm a little bit disappointed. Everyone's gonna have their own personal opinion on what they are and aren't excited about, but this is a boot that I was really excited for and it just ended up being disappointing. I'm disappointed. So with all these new boots coming out all the time, there's stuff that you're gonna be excited for, there's stuff that's gonna be disappointing, but there's also gonna be those new releases that really surprise you, the boots you weren't expecting that much out of that ended up being much better than expected. So for me, the most surprising football boot release of 2018 in regards to how good it is and how much I like it is the Adidas Copa 19 Plus. I've not been a fan of laceless boots, but I really like this one in particular. It fits me really well, and the experience, again, of the Copa 19 Plus is unlike anything else that I've ever tried. What intrigues me so much about this boot is I'm a big fan of kangaroo leather, which you get on this particular product. But typically, when you get a kangaroo leather pair of boots, they tend to all feel very similar. Yes, the overall shape can be different, the sole plates and stud patterns can be different, but the feel and experience of the boot generally doesn't change all that much from one boot to the next. This is the first kangaroo leather boot in a very long time that I've put on my feet, and honestly can't say that it compares to anything else that I've ever worn, but at the same time is also really good. We've had unique boots before that just weren't great. This is not one of them. The experience is unlike anything else that I've ever tried, which is why it's the most surprising boot of the year for me. Now, this is an award where everyone's going to have their own pick based on personal opinion, and feel free to share your own picks for this award and all the other ones down below in the comments of this video. But when you're talking about the best colorway, there were lots of great colorways this year, and I didn't want to leave this exclusive to just general releases. I included the limited stuff as well, but at the same time, because there was so much that came out in 2018, I didn't want to think about it that much. So I kind of just went with my gut instinct. The first boot that popped in my mind when I thought about the best colorway of 2018, which is why I picked the CR7 Chapter 6 Born Leader colorway of the Nike Mercurial Superfly 6 Elite. This is a boot that, for whatever reason, just really stands out, as for me at least, as a really good colorway. What I like so much about this color, and what I've liked since it first released, is the fact that all of the detail in the upper that is very, very apparent from a distance and up close especially, is within the Flyknit construction of the upper. That to me is always really cool when they have an upper as functional as this Flyknit construction, but at the same time, they incorporated so many intricate patterns and designs that make the boot look so cool. I love the accent of the gold along with this clear jade color. It's two colors that you wouldn't necessarily put together, but it looks really, really good. The intricacy of all these little designs within the Nike swoosh as well, I think is quite cool. The logo is really nice. The theme behind the boot, I think, is quite good. The black mid-cut design, and the mid-cut design in general, because of the contrast between the collar and the rest of the upper, it actually makes the mid-cut design look better in my opinion. And I actually like the look of the split sole as well, where the heel is black and the front is more of that clear jade with the wearable finish that I'm not a huge fan of, but as an overall package, I just think that this is a very well put together colorway. Now, as many great colorways that we had this year, there were plenty of awful ones as well. And again, I didn't want to think about this too much. I kind of just wanted to go with my gut feeling on what immediately popped in my mind. And at first, I was going to pick the all black What the Mercurial Superfly 6 Elite, which was a limited edition What the Mercurial release on the new Superfly 6 platform. But I decided against that mainly because it is just a blackout, so there's nothing really ugly about it. But in comparison to the original What the Mercurial Superfly 4, you could argue that it was perhaps a little bit boring, but this is most ugly, not most boring, which is why this award, the first boot that popped in my mind was this, the Lone Hunter Pack colorway of the Adidas Predator 18 Plus, Predator 18.1. Pick any of the Predators, but the 18 Plus in particular, with this combination of the green and the orange and then the black stripes. It's just a really unusual color combination that I just don't think is all that flattering. I happen to think that the design and silhouette and overall look of the Predator 18 Plus is actually really cool. It's one of the better looking boots out there right now, but this is a combination of colors that doesn't match anyone's kit. I don't think anybody would be requesting this color combination, and there's just nothing attractive about it. So one of those questionable colorway releases from Adidas, and for me, probably the worst colorway of 2018.